"We're orphans, sir," the little girl said, standing in the road with a boy clinging to her dress. "And if you ride away, he'll die before noon." Eli Mercer pulled his horse so hard the bit rang. Dust curled around the animal's legs. Morning light lay pale on the Wyoming basin, turning the sage silver and the ruts in the road white as old scars. The boy beside the girl swayed once, fever bright and barely standing. Somewhere out in the grass, a crow barked. The sound carried too clean in the cold air. Eli kept one hand on the rifle across his saddle. He had seen men fake wounds, women hide pistols under shawls, boys cry to lead travelers into ambush. He had never seen a child look at him the way this girl did, as if she had already buried hope and was now bargaining with duty. "Where are your folks?" he asked. "In the ground." "Who buried them?" Her silence answered. Instead, he swung down from the saddle. Gravel crunched under his boots. Up close, the girl looked no more than 9. The boy, maybe 5, burned with fever. Eli touched his forehead and drew back fast. "Fire. What's his name?" "Ben." She hesitated. "I'm Clara." The boy leaned into Eli's coat without knowing who he was. That blind trust hit harder than it should have. Eli crouched and studied the ditch beside the road. Small boot prints. A dragging line where Clara had hauled the boy. Beside them, deeper tracks from grown men in nailed boots. Fresh. Dawn fresh. He straightened. "They followed you." Clara looked at the eastern ridge and said nothing. Wind hissed through the grass. Eli led the horse toward a line of cottonwoods where a narrow creek still moved under skim ice. "If you lie to me," he said, "I'll know it quick." Clara lifted her chin. "Then don't lie to us either." At the creek bottom, Eli opened his saddlebags and took out willow bark, a clean rag, and the last of his medicinal whiskey. Clara watched every motion as if memorizing it. Ben started coughing, harsh and deep. Eli cooled the boy's face, got a little whiskey and creek water into him, and listened to the rattle in his chest. If it didn't get warm soon, the day would finish what the night had started. Hoofbeats rolled down from the ridge. Eli's head came up. One rider, then another behind him. Clara went still as wire. Her hand closed around a rock. "Who's coming?" Eli asked quietly. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The man with the silver tooth. He said if I told anyone, he'd finish what he started." A hat rose over the ridge. Then the rider himself, dark coat, Winchester across the saddle, grin flashing where one tooth caught the sun like a coin. Another rider held back behind him. Eli stood, rifle in hand. The man raised 2 fingers in greeting. "Morning. Those young uns belong to me." "That's so," Eli called. The rider smiled wider. "Their pa stole from me. Got himself killed over it. I'm here to collect what's left. Hand them over, and I'll ride on peaceful." "Their father steal from you?" he asked Clara without looking back. "No," she said at once. "Pa found a leather pouch near Bitter Creek. Said he'd take it to the sheriff in Dry Hollow. That man wanted it before we reached town." The rider spread one hand. "Found, stole. Folks quarrel over words when they're scared." Eli looked at the boy, the girl, and the second rider hanging back in the glare. Shots would carry, and men like this rarely traveled short-handed. "Name?" Eli asked. "Vance Toller." "Well, Vance, these children aren't riding with you." Toller's smile thinned. "You don't know what you're buying." "Good thing I ain't buying." For the first time, the man's eyes lost their warmth. "By sundown, every man in Dry Hollow will hear you robbed me and stole my kin. Folks trust a gentleman before they trust a drifter." Eli answered, "By sundown, maybe you'll be too dead to gossip." The second rider shifted at that. Toller studied the creek bank, the cottonwoods, the rifle in Eli's hands, and Clara kneeling over her brother like a little guard dog with no chance of winning and no thought of stepping aside. "Noon," Toller said at last. "Keep them till noon. After that, I come with company." He touched his brim to Clara. "Little miss, pray your new friend doesn't tire of you." Then he turned his horse and rode back over the ridge. Only when the hoofbeats faded did Eli lower the rifle. Clara looked up at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Why did you?" He stared west toward Dry Hollow. "Because if I leave now," he said, "I'll hear your brother coughing the rest of my life." He wrapped Ben in his bedroll and lifted Clara onto the horse behind him despite the swollen ankle she tried to hide. They had just reached the road again when a third rider appeared on the western rise, blocking Dry Hollow with a shotgun across his lap. The trap had already closed. "Friend of yours?" he called to the shotgun rider. The man grinned through a beard the color of dry rust. "Never had the pleasure. But Vance said to wait here for a drifter carrying stolen property." "Property talks now, only when it's expensive." Clara leaned close enough for Eli to feel her breath against his shoulder. "That's the one who laughed when Pa fell." He made his choice and drove his heels into the horse. Behind him, Clara did not cry out. She only held Ben tighter and trusted a stranger she had met that morning, which felt to Eli heavier than any saddle, oath, or gun ever had. The animal lunged off the road into the creek cut just as the shotgun fired. Pellets shredded brush over Eli's head. Eli rode low through the cottonwoods and turned downstream toward the back edge of town where the church garden met the wash. Eli dismounted at the church and kicked the door open with his boot. Reverend Shaw looked up from polishing lamp chimneys. He was a thin man with rolled sleeves, iron gray hair, and spectacles that always seemed halfway to sliding off his nose. His eyes widened at the sight of Ben. "Mercer," he said. "What in God's name?" "A bed, hot water, blankets, and anyone in town who knows fevers," Eli said. "Fast." The Reverend needed only one look. He shouted for Mrs. Givens, the widow who kept the church linens and half the town's common sense. She came hurrying from the rear room, took Ben into her arms like he weighed nothing, and vanished toward the stove. Clara followed, so close she nearly stepped on the older woman's hem. "There's a complaint," he said. "Man named Toller says you robbed him on the road and took his kin by force." Reverend Shaw stiffened. "Those children are sick and frightened." Pike shrugged. "Maybe, but he's not alone. 3 men with him, cash in their pockets, clean saddles, and a story that fits neat enough for town ears. You know how fast folks decide a stranger's guilt." Eli did know. Too well. From the rear room came Ben's coughing and Clara's murmur, trying to settle him. Eli heard fear in that small voice, but also resolve. He had seen grown men lose theirs faster. "Let the girls speak," Eli said. Pike looked toward the hall. "Girl, you know this fella?" Clara appeared in the doorway, chin lifted though her eyes stayed red-rimmed and exhausted. "He saved my brother." "That ain't what I asked." "It's what matters," Eli said. Pike's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, slow hoofbeats sounded outside, more than one this time. Then a knock landed on the church door. 3 times. Not loud. It didn't need to be. Toller's voice followed, smooth as oil. "Deputy, you in there? Hate to think the law is hiding thieves." Pike muttered a curse. Reverend Shaw reached under the pulpit and came up with an old shotgun. Eli almost laughed at the sight, except nothing about the day deserved it. "Back room," Eli told Clara. "Take Ben." "No, that wasn't a request." She looked ready to fight him, but Mrs. Givens took her shoulder and pulled her away. Ben was bundled in quilts near the stove, cheeks blazing. Pike opened the front door crack. Cold air and dust rolled in. Toller stood on the porch with a red-bearded shotgun rider and another lean man in a buffalo coat. One more waited by the hitch rail. All of them armed, all of them calm. "Afternoon," Toller said. "Still morning?" Pike muttered. "Then I'm early." Toller smiled past him. "I'm here for family. Their father turned rustler and got killed. Sad business. I'd rather settle it quiet." Eli stepped into view. "You can start by telling me what was in the pouch." Toller's eyes flattened. "Money. How much?" "Enough. Gold or paper." The pause was small, but it was there. Eli felt something click into place. His brother Owen had died outside Dry Hollow a week earlier, his wagon turned over, death written off as accident. Before that, Owen had sent a letter asking Eli to come because freight ledgers and army transfers around Bitter Creek were not matching. Stolen rifles. False counts. Names he wanted checked. Not money. Papers. Toller saw he understood, and his smile vanished. "Hand them over," he said softly, "or by evening this town will swear you kidnapped 2 children and murdered decent men in a churchyard." Eli looked at Pike. The deputy did not quite meet his eyes. That was telling too. "No," Eli said. The word landed like a stone in water. Reverend Shaw tightened his grip on the shotgun. Outside, leather creaked. Horses shifted. Toller took one step back from the threshold. Then noon comes early. He drew. Glass exploded from the church door as Eli grabbed Pike by the coat and dragged him sideways. The first bullet chewed splinters from the frame. Reverend Shaw fired so hard the shotgun nearly spun him around. Someone on the porch screamed, "Rear exit!" Eli Sotef. Mrs. Givens appeared with Ben wrapped in quilts. Clara grabbed a fireplace poker longer than her arm. The church had become a target, and the whole town had heard it. Smoke and splinters filled the church aisle. Eli snatched Ben from Mrs. Givens, slung the boy against his chest in the quilts, and shoved Clara toward the rear passage. "Move, Eli Torkit." They burst through the back door into the churchyard. A hand pump leaned beside stacked firewood, and beyond it ran a narrow alley between the bakery and the livery. The bakery ovens breathed hot yeast and coal smoke into the cold air. Bullets punched through the church boards behind them. A horse screamed near the hitch rail. Pike stumbled after them. "This is bad. You think?" At the alley mouth, the red-bearded rider stepped out with the shotgun rising. Clara moved first. She snatched a tin pan of ash from beside the bakery oven and flung it hard. Gray dust burst across the man's face. He fired blind, blowing apart a rain barrel, and Eli drove his shoulder into the outlaw's chest, smashing him backward under the bakery wagon. They ran on. Eli angled for the livery, hoping to cut through and out the far side before Toller boxed them in. They made the stable doors just as a rider swept around the end of the building. Vance Toller, revolver in hand, silver tooth bright through powder smoke. "Mercer," he called. "The pouch names your brother. Ask yourself why he died before you call him innocent." The words hit like a fist. Eli stopped dead for half a breath. Clara looked up at him, confused. Pike slammed into Eli's shoulder from behind. That half-breath cost them. Toller fired. The bullet tore through Ben's quilt bundle and buried in the stall post, so close Eli felt the splinter spray against his neck. Ben's hand found Eli's sleeve, and that touch steadied him more than anger did. Whatever waited inside those papers, the living mattered first, and he would not forget it. Eli turned. For a moment, even Toller looked surprised. Then he smiled slow. Pike's voice came hoarse. "Drop the rifle, Mercer. I should have done it before the church." Clara stared at him as if betrayal had become a shape she could finally see. Eli studied the deputy's face and found shame, fear, and something worse, need. Bribe money spent. That's perhaps. A man already bought and only now learning the price. "You wear a badge crooked," Eli said. Pike swallowed. "Town doesn't pay enough to wear it straight." Toller dismounted, easy as a man stepping into his own parlor. Another outlaw came limping from the alley, sleeve bloodied from Reverend Shaw's shotgun. The red-bearded one was still somewhere behind the bakery, groaning. Horses kicked in their stalls, smelling blood and panic. "Now," Toller said, "we end the sermon. Girl, where's the pouch? Your father didn't die for nothing." Clara lifted the poker with both hands. "You killed him because he wouldn't give it up." Toller laughed once. "Close enough. What's in it?" Eli asked. Toller looked at him. "Paper. Names. Shipments. Enough stolen rifles to start 3 wars and pay for 2 elections. Your brother saw the books. Then he wanted out." Eli's stomach turned cold. Owen, desperate to save the family place, might have stepped into rotten company before understanding how deep it ran. That did not mean he deserved the ditch where they found him. "And the children?" Eli said. Toller shrugged. "Witnesses grow into talkers." Ben stirred in Eli's arms, fever-dazed. His eyes found Clara. "Lark," he whispered. She blinked. "It's Clara. Pa said when I'm scared, look for the lark on the fence. She stays when the hawk circles." The words cut through the yard cleaner than any bullet. Clara's face changed. Not softer, steadier. And then Eli saw it. She was thinking. "The pouch is in my doll," she said. Every head turned. Toller stepped closer. "Where?" "By the cottonwoods, near a stone shaped like a boot. I hit it when Ben fell." The limping outlaw cursed. Toller snapped, "Go get it." The man mounted and galloped north out of town. That left Toller, Pike, the red-bearded shotgun man crawling back into view, and Eli with the children trapped against the trough. The posse would come when the shooting reached the sheriff's ears, but not soon enough to help. Toller knew it too. He paced once, revolver loose at his side, eyes never leaving Clara. Minutes dragged under the smells of hay, dung, smoke, and hot iron drifting from the forge. Then the rider returned, alone, holding a rag doll ripped open at the seam. Papers stuck from the torn cloth belly and fluttered in the wind. Toller snatched them and scanned the pages. Color drained from his face. Whatever he had feared, the papers were worse. Eli glimpsed a column of false tallies, and below it, Pike's name beside payment marks. The deputy saw it too. "You said my name wouldn't be there," Pike whispered. Toller did not bother lying. "I said what I needed." From the north road came new hoofbeats. Faster, many of them. Sheriff Boone at last. Toller heard them. So did the horses. He moved in one sharp blur, grabbed Clara by the shoulder, and yanked her against his chest. The revolver jammed against her temple. "Nobody move," he said, "or the lark drops first." Clara did not scream when Toller's gun touched her head. She went rigid, dust streaking her face, the iron poker fallen from her hand. Ben made a thin sound from Eli's arms and tried to rise, but fever and fear dragged him back. Pike stood 3 feet away with his revolver hanging uselessly at his side, every lie he had believed collapsing inside him. "Drop your rifle," Toller said to Eli. "Kick it here. Then tell Boone those papers are lies written by your brother to save his own neck. Do that, and maybe the girl keeps breathing." Clara looked at him but did not plead. Her eyes said something harder. "Don't trade truth for me." Pike saw it too. Shame worked over his face like weather over rock. "How much did he pay you?" Eli asked without taking his eyes off Toller. Pike swallowed. "Enough to keep the bank from taking my mother's place. Enough to make me call cowardice duty. And now—" The deputy breathed once, ragged. "Now I know the price." Ben stirred again. His fevered gaze found Clara. "Lark," he whispered. "Don't let the hawk win." Clara's mouth trembled, but she managed, "I won't." That small exchange opened something in the yard wider than fear. Eli felt it in his chest like an old nail finally giving. He had spent years leaving places before they could ask anything of him. He had buried Owen, buried the ranch, buried every promise that sounded like home. Yet here he stood between a bought deputy, a hunted girl, and a sick child who still believed somebody could stay. Maybe that was what his brother had tried to do at the end, step back toward decency even after stepping wrong. Eli reached into his coat very slowly. Toller stiffened, but Eli drew only a brass cavalry token hanging from a leather string. Owen's initials were carved on the back. "My brother gave me this before we split up after the war," Eli said. "He used to tell me when a storm hit, find the smallest thing still standing and hold to it." He looked at Clara. "Today that's you." He tossed the token. She caught it against her chest with her free hand. For the first time since the road, she looked like a child about to cry. For the first time, she did not stop herself. "Not quite," Eli said. He turned his eyes to Pike. "When Boone rides in, you can hide behind him and pray. Or you can choose what kind of man they remember leading Clara back from this yard." The words struck home. Pike's revolver rose an inch, not toward Eli now, but not yet toward Toller either. He was still halfway between men. Then Ben coughed hard and blood flecked his lip. Everything changed. Clara twisted against Toller's hold with a strength born of terror. "Ben!" Toller jerked her back. "Hold still." Eli took one step forward. "Let her look at her brother." "Take another, and she dies." The hoofbeats were almost there. Reverend Shaw's voice carried faintly from the road, shouting for Boone to hurry. The red-bearded outlaw had crawled to a dropped shotgun near the trough. Pike saw him. Eli saw Pike see him. This was the hinge. Pike kicked the shotgun away without looking. A small act. A deciding one. Toller's head turned for just a blink. Clara used it. She stamped down on his instep and drove her elbow backward into his ribs. The move lacked force, but not surprise. Toller cursed, and the barrel lifted a fraction from her head. Eli did not wait. He lunged. Toller dragged Clara aside and fired. The shot tore through Eli's sleeve and burned a line across his arm. Pike fired at the same instant, hitting the trough and showering them all with splinters. The red-bearded outlaw dove for the fallen shotgun again. Ben slid from the quilts, hit his knees, and cried out. Clara dropped beside him at once, token still clenched in one fist. Eli grabbed Toller's gun wrist with both hands and slammed it against the trough edge. Bone cracked. Toller howled. The revolver fell, but the fight did not end. The red-bearded man came up with the shotgun. Pike turned and shot him square in the chest before the barrel leveled. The blast from Pike's revolver echoed off the stable walls like judgment. Silence hit for one thin second. Then Sheriff Boone and his riders poured into the yard. Rifles came up. Orders snapped. Toller, bleeding and half-kneeling, reached with his left hand for the knife in his boot. Eli saw it, drew his own revolver, and leveled it at Toller's brow. The yard froze again. One twitch and Toller would die. Eli could feel the pull of it, hot and simple. Owen's grave, the road, the children, the church glass. It would be easy to turn pain into a single trigger squeeze and call it justice. But Clara was watching. Ben, too, through fever and tears. Eli let out one slow breath. Mercy isn't obedience, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone. Then he kicked the knife away and shoved Toller face first in the mud instead of shooting him. Sheriff Boone dismounted hard. Somebody started talking. Pike did. Pike told everything. He told Boone about the bribes paid and folded bills under the saloon table, about false freight tallies near Bitter Creek, about Army rifles sold twice overthrew ghost shipments and missing crates. He admitted Toller had used his badge to turn rumor into law whenever outsiders got curious. He admitted Owen Mercer had first touched the Ledger scheme, hoping to save his family ranch, then tried to expose it when he understood what men were dying for. He admitted he had helped call Owen's death an accident. He looked at the papers, at Pike behind Boone's riders with his wrists tied, at Clara kneeling beside Ben, one hand on the little boy's hair. Owen's name was there. No use pretending otherwise. No, Eli said. His voice carried farther than he expected. He wasn't clean. He stepped wrong. Then he tried to step back. Print that plain. Don't make him a saint because he died, and don't make him the devil because he feared too late. The doctor came at last from the hotel, shirt half-buttoned and breath-heavy with stale whiskey, but Mrs. Givens bullied him sober in a hurry. Mustard plasters were laid over Ben's chest. Steam kettles filled the parsonage room. By dusk, the fever broke enough for the child to ask for bread and water. Clara sat beside the bed the whole time, refusing sleep until Mrs. Givens and Eli both promised they would wake her if his breathing changed. Only then did she finally fold. She stepped out onto the church porch after dark, where lantern light made a warm square on the boards and the town still murmured over arrests, statements, and the sudden cost of pretending not to know. Eli found her there hugging her knees. "He'll live," she asked. "Looks that way." She nodded once. Then the tears came. Not loud, not wild. Just a child's exhausted grief spilling at last, now that survival had loosened its grip. Eli stood stiff for a moment, uncertain what comfort looked like when offered instead of avoided. Then he sat beside her and let her cry into his coat. Your pa was right. He looked at the dark street, at the jail lamp burning where Pike awaited whatever sentence truth would bring, at the stable where Toller lay chained and cursing, at the church window glowing over Ben's bed. For years, he had measured life by departures. Yet the thought of riding away before sunrise felt suddenly like cowardice in a fresh coat. Longer than that, he said. 3 weeks changed Dry Hollow more than the previous 3 years had. Boone sent for territorial marshals. Toller and his surviving men were taken south in irons. Pike signed a full confession and accepted the cell without asking mercy. Before the marshals led him away, he stopped once outside the church and looked at Eli. "Do they have kin?" he asked. "No." Pike nodded toward the children inside. "Then don't let them learn what empty sounds like again." That sentence stayed with Eli. When the graves of Clara and Ben's parents were marked properly on the hill east of town, Eli took the children there himself. Wind moved through the grass in slow silver waves. Clara set a small carved lark on the fresh stone, something Ben had whittled crooked but earnest. None of them said much. They did not need to. The silence there was not empty. It was full of names spoken true at last. Eli had come to Dry Hollow intending to settle Owen's affairs and vanish. Instead, he bought a wagon, then lumber, then a plow blade from the blacksmith. North of Bitter Creek stood an abandoned spread with a sound well, 2 cottonwoods, and enough roof left to promise more. It needed mending, fencing, and patience. Those were things Eli understood. Clara chose the east room because morning light reached it first. Ben chose the future dog they did not yet own. Mrs. Given sent quilts. Reverend Shaw sent seed packets, and a Bible nobody expected Eli to read. The blacksmith sent nails and refused payment until harvest. Dry Hollow, embarrassed by its own delay, tried kindness in practical forms. By first frost, smoke rose daily from the rebuilt chimney. Ben's cough was gone. Clara could laugh without sounding surprised by it. Eli still woke some nights hearing Owen's unfinished words, but now there were other sounds after: a kettle lid rattling, Ben talking in sleep, Clara moving about before dawn to start biscuits because she liked beating him to the stove. Home, he found, was not a place that erased grief. It was a place that made room for it and kept the lamp lit anyway. Years later, travelers passing the Mercer place north of Bitter Creek would see 3 names carved into the gatepost and, above them, a painted lark with its wings lifted against the weather. At dusk, when the grass turned copper and the windows burned gold, they might glimpse a tall man on the porch while a girl nearly grown read from a book and a boy ran laughing from the corral. The wind would move through the cottonwoods, soft as turning pages, and the house would stand there in the last light like a promise finally kept.